So I'm going to turn the engine on. I'm going to take us up to probably around about 30 meters just using the throttle. I'm not going to apply any forces to the pedals or to the joystick. Just going to take us up about 30 meters, and then we'll talk about what the pedals do and then also what the various control surfaces do. Now, in real world, a helicopter has a collective, which is essentially your throttle. That's the handbrake looking thing, which is down by the side of your legs in a helicopter, or in game you're going to be using an analog throttle set. So if I just raise my throttle, I'm only going to raise it to probably around about 55% thereabouts, and just take us up to about 30 meters. I've not got auto hover on, so just let me click my auto hover on. I've got one of my buttons on my joystick pre-configured for auto hover. In fact, 50 meters, that should be fine. Okay. As we look down, you've got the pedals there. Those are your yaw pedals, and if you apply left pedal while in a stationary position, and you apply left pedal gently, it will allow your helicopter to pivot on its axis around to the left, and the more you press it, the faster it goes. Okay, so there's a demonstration. That's how quick mine is. And I'll just let it center back again, so I've taken my feet off the pedal. I'm just going to let the helicopter stabilize. There's a little seagull, hello. Okay, same with the right. If I apply right pedal, it's going to pivot round to the right. Again, I'm only using the yaw right now, I'm not using any of the surfaces at all. You might say, actually, I'm just climbing, but I'm not applying throttle, I've just not leveled it off. Okay, there we go. So there's the right pedal. Okay. Now, taking hold of the joystick, feet off the pedals, my altitude is fine. I'm now in a stable hover. It might just gradually climb, it might gradually fall. We'll just keep an eye on that for now. Ultimately, I'm not touching my throttle for the next section. If I apply left joystick, or A on your keyboard if you're going to be using the keyboard, and I just basically pitch the aircraft to the left, the aircraft is going to begin crab style moving to the left hand side. So it's going to start moving just over to the left. If I use the ground as reference, there you go, we're moving to the left. Bear in mind we're in auto hover mode, so it's not going to pitch significantly. This is just an aid to help, the inexperienced flyers pitch to the left. If I took auto hover off, like that, so auto hover is now off, and I pitched it to the left, the helicopter would now begin moving to the left. I'm just keeping my eye on my artificial horizon, just so I've got control of the helicopter. Now if I did the same to the right, so centralised it and then moved it back to the right, you'll find that the helicopter will now move over to the right in that crab style. Again, no pedals, no nothing, just only right joystick. And I'm just adjusting the joystick based on the strength of the amount of right hand movement I'm looking to apply. So I'm just looking out the right hand side, and as you can see we're crabbing along the area. Okay, cool. I'm just going to apply auto hover again and then bring us back to around about 100 meters. Again, I'm not really fussed at what altitude we use, but it's just helpful, I think, isn't it? Okay. Now then, if I apply forward control surface on the joystick, which is your W key, you'll see that if I use the ground as a reference, we will move forward in auto hover. This also pitches the nose down, so you get a small amount of airspeed there, so 12 kilometers an hour, as you can see in the top corner. Now just let go of the control surface. I'm going to release auto hover, and I'm going to pitch the nose forward. So you'll see we start to lose altitude, but the airspeed begins to gain, and I'm just now going to level off the nose and the aircraft, and we're going to maintain around about 100 knots. 100 knots is an agile speed. It means you can do almost anything you want with the helicopter with all of the surfaces. Once you get to a speed of approximately 130 to 140 knots, the benefits of the tail rotor are lost. So if you want to be completely agile with your helicopter, being able to use all of the surfaces, then keep it below around about 130, 140, depending on the helicopter you're using. Now then, if I was to keep the throttle where it is, but instead pitch backwards, we drop airspeed, Once we drop airspeed, if you were to level out using your artificial horizon and level your wings, so if I'm looking at this section here, that's your artificial horizon, yeah, you're almost in a stable hover there. So when you want to go from transitioning, from forward travel or even rearwards travel, which is what I'm going to do now, just invoke some rearward travel by lifting up the nose. I'm also just going to put a little bit of throttle in there as well, to keep us at a safe altitude. Okay, you can see that we start to go backwards at a rate of knots. But again, if I just counter that action by pitching the nose down, and as you can see the airspeed's beginning to drop, I can then also just level it out a bit more. There we go, and we can just control the hover state just by being really considered with the inputs that we put into the control surfaces, such as the joysticks and the throttle and what have you. Okay, so that's your basics for how the aircraft manoeuvres. I'm sure you'll come to terms with all of that fairly quickly. The biggest challenge I think most people have when flying helicopters is the fact that landing seems to be the biggest problem they have, controlling the airspeed and about the approaching. Again, I'm only doing this in one take. If you hear some sounds in the background, that's my son making noises. He's playing with his iPad. Okay, so I've actually not got my hands on any controls right now, but we're beginning to get up some airspeed, so let's take a look at landing. Now, the key thing to know about when you're flying a helicopter in Arma, or in fact any helicopter, is that if you are flying forwards, let's say at around about 200 knots, and we'll try and get to 200 knots in this helicopter, is that if you pull up to stop, like so I'm pulling up, I rapidly begin to gain height, and that's because my throttle is still applying energy to the rotors. So I'm just climbing now. I've more or less stopped, but I'm still climbing. If I was to do that using, I'm just going to pitch it right down to the ground, just bear with me a second. If I did that using auto hover, which is what we see a lot of inexperienced Arma helicopter pilots doing, is they'll come into a contested zone, best intentions, try and pick people up or drop something off or whatever. They see they want to land somewhere, come in for an approach, and then click auto hover on. Now, because that energy is still in there, you begin to rise suddenly. I'm not actually applying any controls at the moment, but what it's done, it's just put me an extra 100 meters in the air to 200 meters, and that's just by pressing auto hover. So we need to get you out of that practice as soon as possible. So this is what I'm going to cover off with you now. I'm just going to release auto hover again. There we go. So I'm currently in a stable hover. Let's see what we're going to do. Okay. Just over where that factory is, to the left-hand side of the factory, there's like a flat area. What we're going to do is we're going to come in for an approach into that onto that area and touch down, and I'll talk through touching down in that area. Otherwise, we'll touch down at that football pitch, which is in the middle of town. But we'll try for now for this factory area. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reduce my collective. I'm roughly about 55% collective now. I'm not giving it all the 100% on the engines. I'm just giving it around about 55-60%. I've got an analog throttle, so when I talk about my percentages, I'm just talking about how far forward or how much energy I'm putting into the throttle right now. Okay, so I'm doing about 160 knots, and what I want to do as I come round to approach the landing is to begin to get rid of some of that energy. But if I don't reduce the collective, I'm not going to be able to slow down and descend. I'll be able to slow down, but I'll rise. So I'm actually reducing my throttle now to around about 40%, and I'm just pitching the nose up ever so slightly to start dropping the airspeed. And as you can see here, just in this example, as I've done that, it's allowed me to slow down significantly. So I'm just going to give it 50%, 52, 53% throttle. I'm going to point the helicopter's nose at where I want it to be, and I'm just going to control that airspeed at around about 60-70 knots as I approach. I'm only doing this slow. It doesn't need to be a fast demonstration. So I can see where I want to touch down. As I say, I've only got 55-ish%. I'm just going to pitch the nose up and just ever so slightly reduce. I'm not even at 50% throttle, 51%, and I just began to come down, and a nice soft touchdown at the area we were targeting. Now it's keen to know that when you're coming in for a landing, no matter which helicopter you use, always try to touch down below 20 knots. The tolerance is around about 30, but I always target 20. Just gives me a good margin of error. But essentially, you're looking to come in and touch down no greater really than 20 knots. So there you go. So that's all I did there. Just to run you through again what I did, I reduced my throttle to around about, well, just above 50% where the aircraft begins to pitch down. So I'm moving forward now, I'm about 60%. Leveled off. If I just reduce my throttle slightly, I'm not touching any surfaces right now, you'll see that as I reduce, there you go, I'm about 52%, 53%. The helicopter begins going down automatically. I've not touched my joystick. Just being aware of those pylons up ahead. I crashed horrendously last night with my clan when I didn't spot a pylon. But yeah, I've reduced throttle. I'm not putting any control surface inputs in, but we're already going down. Okay, if I was to just pitch the nose up, it would reduce my airspeed while still going down. So if you just keep it in this balanced state, you'll see that we continue to go down. Again, I've not touched my throttle. Oh, there we go. I've had to put a bit of throttle on it there, otherwise I think we might have touched down hard. And there we go. We're down on the ground safely. This time I'm going to come in to that area again with a bit more speed. In fact, it's probably just worthwhile I talk to you about bleeding speed. I'll do a nap of the earth approach around the area. So nap of the earth basically is following the contours at rooftop height, avoiding things such as pylons and these army barracks. So we're coming in now about 200 knots. What you might learn as you're flying, and it comes with experience as well, is that as you actually bank like you would in a normal aircraft, you begin to bleed speed. And the idea is that actually when you're flying and you're bleeding that speed, I'm just pulling back on the control surface now and you'll see that we dropped a load of speed there. Okay, and we're now just entering that balanced state as well, which is very, very good. Okay, so let's touch it down again. I'm just going to point it down at the ground and turn the chopper so I can see where I'm going. Excellent. Just reducing throttle. I'm below 50%. I'm about 45% collective now. I've still got my eye on where I want to be. I'm looking at my approach so I can see I've got a nice clear approach. There are no buildings in the way. And I'm just going to control my airspeed and continue to reduce throttle. I'm now at about 20% throttle because I was afraid I was going to overshoot. But I'm controlling where I am using my throttle and my control surfaces. And there we go. We're now just about to touch down. In a nice, balanced, non-panicky way. Just don't panic, practice, it's all it takes. I'm at 50% throttle on the ground now. As I begin to apply throttle, it's there for me straight away. I don't go to zero, generally speaking, when I'm doing drop-offs. Okay, let's take off. Key to making your landings is actually assessing the approach on a landing. So we're going to go back into the factory, but we're going to go into a tight area. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to go full throttle now. I'm not really too fussed about the throttle elements of it right now. I'm just going to show you the area we're going to land in. So there's the factory, and just between I don't even know what it is, I'll call it a granary and the shed with the boxes around it, I want to touch down in there with this helicopter. So how am I going to do that? I need to create and look at the correct approach. So I think for me, just looking at the compass, I think the best approach is coming in from about 70 degrees and touching down. So let's now head out to around about that area. And now I'm using my throttle again now just to control my descent. And I'm using my joystick to control where I'm pointing the nose, as well as my airspeed. So you can see I'm now making an approach into the area. slowly reducing throttle. I'm about 51, 52% throttle again. I'm pointing the nose down. Don't be afraid of pointing your nose down, it's not a disaster, as long as you control your throttle, yeah? And you can bring it in to a nice soft landing. You can just add throttle if you're not where you want it to be, just to tuck in, so you know you guys aren't being shot at if you touch down here. And you can see we're nicely tucked in, and you know, if anybody was in a hot zone, this would be a nice area to land, pick up, drop off, that kind of thing. Let's get out of here now and do some more practice. Okay, now I did see there was a base over here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Let's take a look if there's somewhere to land here. So I'm actually at 100% throttle now, and I'm just using the nose. Oh, there we go. That's a nice area there. Let's have a look at touching down. So what I want to do now at 200 knots is I'm just reducing my throttle to about 60%, but I'm using my nose of the helicopter and my joystick controls to actually keep me pointed to where I want to be. I've now reduced my throttle to around about 40%, and I'm just using my yaw pedals, that's the agility in the helicopter, to point it in the direction I want to go. And there we go, I'm now coming in, I'm now descending, I'm at about 48% on the throttle. I'm now at 50% because I don't want to come in too hard. And I'm just going to touch it down there. Just give it a bit yaw pedal, straighten it up as I come in. There we go. It's not a beautiful one, it's quite hard to talk and fly. You know, and give a narrative in terms of what you're doing exactly. Okay, that was my son in the background. My son has disability, so I don't want any flaming in the comment box. Yeah, my son can't talk, but that's just his way of saying, keep going, Daddy. Okay, so let's do that again. That was a fairly nice landing. It wasn't too disastrous. Okay, let's head back now to Altis Air Base, and then we'll just wind up this quick tutorial in terms of how to fly your helicopters and hopefully give you some help in terms of flying safely. Now again, you know, I can't emphasize enough to you the fact that you need to bleed speed on approach to your landing zone is absolutely critical. As long as you can get down to approximately 100 knots when you're coming into your landing zone, you should be fine, because then you'll have the complete agility and being able to use all of your control surfaces for flying your helicopter. Okay, so just as an example of this, I'm coming in to Altis Air Base now, and what we'll do is we'll just go and land just outside the main terminal. Okay, but I'm doing 208 knots, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bank the aircraft, I'm going to reduce throttle. As you'll see on the artificial horizon, my nose is above the horizon, my airspeed is dropping now to 170, which is pretty good. I'm now reducing my throttle to below 50, and you'll notice that the aircraft is now beginning to descend. So I'm just going to turn the aircraft, give it a little bit of right yaw pedal as well, and I'm turning in. Airspeed is now at about 80-90 knots. Just going to straighten it up, and I'm now around about 50% throttle, so I've increased throttle slightly there, just so it'll get me to where I'm going. I'm going to level off because I can see where I want to touch down, which is that big black splodge. It's going to reduce my airspeed. I'm now reducing throttle. I'm at about 40%. I'm now back at 50. I've seen where I want to be. I'm going to keep pointing my nose at it. You know, I'm not going to argue with that. There we go. Just by adjusting the nose in terms of your airspeed, so when you point the nose down, you go fast. When you lift the nose up, you start to slow down or go backwards. And again, just with them adjustments of throttle in terms of your lift and the amount of lift that you're applying will hopefully make a big difference to your experience while flying helicopters in Arma.